Welcome, everyone, to episode 147 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Pentelarusco. I write stuff and podcasts too. And my guest today is Edward Willett. If you know who he is, he's one of the best sci-fi writers out there. It was really cool to have him on the show. It's been a little while since I've been back. For the last couple weeks, I've been working on rewrites for my first novel. It's getting ready to be finished off pretty soon. I'm trying to get it done so my editor doesn't beat me. You know, I don't want to have to explain that I fell down the stairs or I slipped and fell or some other terrible thing. Because, you know, editors are who they are and stuff. But the writing's been going pretty well. I think I solved the majority of the problems I've had. I could be wrong. And also just a lot of things have been happening. Since next little bit, it's going to get really, really crazy. I'm going to talk about that over the next few episodes here and there. I'm going to spread out the news instead of just bombarding you all at once. But I wanted to promote a couple friends here before we get into the episode. So, Jill Maria Robinson, who's been on the show in the past, is actually going to be going for an interview, a really cool one on CTV2. It is currently Live Daily. She's going to be on Wednesday. You should check her out. She'll be there around 8 a.m. in the morning, channel CTV2, channel 13, or Blue Sky TV 108. So, so take a look. It's going to be awesome. I got a little bit of a cough here. The second part, though, is also taking place on Wednesday. My friend, the amazing, the talented, the rock star of Canadian shorts. I'm sure she'll kind of like roll her eyes at this. Mackenzie Fix is doing a really cool little event. This Wednesday, she's doing Canada Shorts. I'm just pulling up the information now. And that to me is really, really cool that she's doing this. She'll be doing a reading at a local little library. You should definitely check her out. Hold on a second here. The Canadian Shorts at the Memorial Park Library tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. on the 7th. Take a look. It will be incredible as well. All right, let's get on to the show, shall we?
All right, so I'm going to turn the recorder on. It's on. So if you have anything incriminating you'd like to say, make it good. So, just the way it is. But anyway, yeah, you've been writing for a long time.
Yes, I have. Technically since I was 11, technically, but professionally getting paid for it because I started in journalism. You could say I've been writing professionally since 1980.
That's a long time, man. So
the books came along quite a bit after that.
Yeah, I find what I found like with myself, because I'm getting into fiction. And I started on the fiction end of things, is I somehow ended up going closer towards, like I'm not going to say like journalism, but features and interviews and things like that. And it builds credibility for when you actually get into fiction itself. It's kind of weird how that actually works, but and then suddenly once you have like a proven track record, you get these opportunities in the stuff you kind of wanted to do. Did you always want to get into journalism, or did you want to get into like fiction primarily, or both?
Well, when I was in like I said, I wrote my when I was 11 years old, and a junior high school teacher in Weybridge, Saskatchewan, where I was, Tony Tunbridge, we called him Tony the Tiger, actually did me the privilege of taking it seriously. Like, he didn't just pat me on the head and say, "Oh, look, you wrote a short story." He said, I don't understand why it was called Castor Glass Hypership Test Pilot, which shows you where I was coming from very early on. And he said, "You're aliens. I don't understand why they act the way they do, and I don't understand this, and this could be better." And somehow that helped, and I wanted to write better every time I wrote something after that. So I started writing longer and longer stuff, and I actually wrote 3 novels in high school, plus a near novel, one a year, and I would type them up and share them with my classmates, and I found out that I could tell stories that people enjoyed. And somewhere along in there, I decided that's what I really, really wanted to do, was write science fiction and fantasy. But I was also a practical enough kid to think, yeah, nobody makes a living at that right off the bat. And so that's why I went into journalism. I thought it was writing, and I would be building experience and, using words and at the same time I might actually get a job that would pay.
That would, well, no.
A newspaper reporter and editor.
Yeah. So did you? Okay. So I had an eerily similar thing in high school. I didn't have Tony the Tiger, but I had a teacher named Mr. Sharp. I mean, I wrote my first novel in high school. Mine was called Michael Through Time. I did time travel. Yours sounds like a much better title, I have to admit. But he did the same thing. He wrote it. He would read it. He would critique it. He would like tell me what to work on. But he also complimented me too on some of the things I came up with. Again, it made me want to do it more. That kind of feedback, I think, is very essential for anybody in any creative field. And it's always cool when a teacher teacher steps up and goes, "Yeah, I want to help you." It's usually a sign of a great teacher. So it sounds like he was cool.
Yeah, he was.
Okay.
I had two excellent English teachers in high school as well that helped. So yeah, all of that kind of went together. And of course, I wanted to write science fiction and fantasy because I'm the youngest of three boys, and my two older brothers both read it. And of course, you want to be like your big brothers. So that was kind of how I got latched onto it to begin with.
Yeah. Well, no. What did you read? Like, I'm kind of curious.
Oh, the things I remember reading as a kid, all of the Heinlein juveniles.
Okay.
Heinlein, Isaac Asimov's robot stories. I loved Andre Norton. I wasn't just reading science fiction and fantasy, but I did go through our library in Weyburn, and this was during the time when science fiction always had a little sticker on the back, a chip inside a stylized atom, and that's how you knew that it was a science fiction story. And so they stood out on the shelf. I guess there was one for mysteries, maybe two, maybe one for romance. I don't know, but I latched onto those, and I went through the library and basically would whatever had that little sticker on it, I would read. And at one point, the librarian actually wanted to talk to my mom because she said, your son is checking things out of the adult side of the library because they had the stickers on them for science fiction.
Yeah.
And my mom said, "Oh no, it's all right. He just reads science fiction," and I don't think she actually knew what was in some of this.
Well, especially Heinlein. Yeah. No, I read
Stranger in a Strange Land.
Yeah, anything past that point with Heinlein is yeah, that was like for me when I was in high school, that was extra sex education there because it's like your wildest dreams and some of the stuff he's talking about in there is like I didn't think these things were possible. Shows what I know, but
well, mine I actually had a chance to tell them at a World Science Fiction Convention once. There's a book by Robert Silverberg called The World Inside.
That book's fantastic.
I read when I was about 12 or 13, and I learned a lot from that.
No, Rob Silverberg is honestly, I think, a little bit underrated. Like, he's a very, very gifted writer. But again, he's just very graphic when it comes to certain situations. Any of his books, like Dying Inside is a really good one too, and like he was really, really, really good. He wasn't quite as descriptive about how some things work like Heinlein was, but he didn't shy away from it either. I found him a little bit more palatable somehow, some way. I don't know, maybe it just says something about me, but
very different styles and very different. Yeah, you never mistake a Silverberg for a Heinlein.
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Like you grew up like I love like Heinlein's early stuff, like his juveniles, like everything from Starship Troopers before. I consider some of the best science fiction ever. He worked within those parameters so well. Like it was like my personal favorite stuff from that. I liked The Roads Must Roll, which is a short story, but it was really, really like it's amazingly good. I liked what was it called? I liked The Puppet Masters. It was the original alien invasion takeover thing. It was just so well done. And Starship Troopers is just like amazing.
All of those, and I think my favorite as a kid was
Have a Spacesuit
Travel.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Daughters. Yeah.
That one I think
My daughter was 16, and I read that out loud to her, and she quite loved it.
No, that book he had a lot of fun with that. I always had the feel like some books you get the feeling I don't know. I've never been published with any of the bigger companies, but sometimes I get the sense that authors sometimes do things because they're being paid to do them more so than they love doing it. That doesn't mean they don't love the work, but some work is more near and dear to you than other things. But sometimes I think you come across a concept that's just really, really fun, and when you have that, it shows in the work.
Yeah.
That's just kind of my thing on that. So So how long did you do journalism for?
I went to university in the States, Searcy, Arkansas, Harding University.
Okay.
It's not a very big town. It was the birthplace of the indoor tanning parlor. Other than being a university town, that's its claim to fame.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back with my journalism degree, and I promptly started working at the Weyburn Review, which was the weekly newspaper in my hometown of Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And I was a newspaper reporter taught for 4 years, and then I became news editor, and I edited the paper for another 4 years. And I graduated from university when I was 20, so I was news editor by the time I was 24 or 25. And so 8 years I spent as a weekly newspaper. And the great thing about a weekly newspaper was I was writing like 3 features a week and doing news stories, and I had a column, and I even drew the editorial cartoon.
Nice.
So yeah, it was just a great experience all the way around.
Well, no, I almost went into journalism myself. Once upon a time, I was a touch too flaky at the time to do it, and that's just my own failures on that. But yeah, I mean, one of the things, a lot of my teachers and a lot of them came from a similar background. They worked in a small paper, and the good thing about a smaller town paper, you get a lot more practical experience doing things, right? And because there's just not, you don't have the staff a bigger newspaper has, so you gotta kind of figure this stuff out on your own. And I think and just something just from my own experience doing different mediums now, I find doing different mediums or different styles makes your fiction writing better.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, all writing is writing. The more different kinds of writing you do, the more it all feeds into each other and informs each other. So you can use fiction techniques in writing feature stories, and you can use journalistic techniques in writing fiction, and all these things feed together. It all comes down to making good use of words.
Absolutely. So when did you get your big break? How'd you do that?
Oh, well, I actually quit after being a newspaper reporter and editor. I moved to Regina, where I live now, capital of Saskatchewan, and I started as the communications officer for the Saskatchewan Science Center, which was brand new at the time, and I did that for fun. And I decided I was going to quit my job and be a freelance writer, but it wasn't that I sold anything. I just decided I wanted to finally do what I thought I wanted to do, and I managed to put it together, but I didn't really sell a novel for quite a while. I was writing, stuff we've been talking about, feature articles, and I did some research for a TV series and things like that. My first book was actually the memorable Using Microsoft Publisher for Windows 95.
Oh, God.
And my second book was Using Microsoft Publisher for Windows 97. And for a while in there, my bread and butter was actually doing these kind of big computer books in an era when people were still, this was at the level of to open a file, click file, open. That's and stuff like that. But it paid reasonably well, and so that was nice. And then, that market has gone away because people have moved beyond that level.
What? Well, yeah, unless you're working in a like my day gig currently right now. Sometimes some of those modules make me think of those things. They really do. Sorry.
So then I sold I say sell because the publisher was not a great publisher, but my first novel was called Soul Worm, a young adult novel, and that came out in 1997. And then I had another one with that same little publisher called The Dark Unicorn, and then I had one called Andy Nebula Interstellar Rockstar. These are all with very small publishers. And then I had a Lost in Translation, which was based on a short story, actually, which it had sold before. And it went to a publisher called 5 Star, and 5 Star is really a book packager. And their thing was that the editor would collect these books and publish them, but they just went to libraries on a kind of a subscription basis. So a library would subscribe and get 2 romance novels, 2 westerns, 2 science fiction, 2 Christian novels, these kind of niche things. And I was one of these science fiction from the science fiction section of that. But the editor of that was a fellow named Martin H. Greenberg, who was very well known as an anthology editor and other things in the field. And he had a strong connection with Daw Books. And one day I got a call from my editor at 5 Star, John Helfers, and he said, Mr. Greenberg wants to talk to you. And I said, well, that's very nice. I've never been Mr. Corbett. Okay. And he came on and he said that Daw had a hole in its publication schedule. They had asked him to send over some of the books that he had done through Five Star, and he sent them some of the books. And out of the books that he sent them, they picked my book, Lost in Translation, to plug the hole in their publishing schedule, and a mass market paperback edition. So that was my big break into DAW Books. And once you have a contract with a major publisher, it's really easy to get an agent, because you say, "Hi, I've got a contract. Would you like 15% of it?" And they say, "Sure." So I got my agent, Ethan Ellenberg, and then he said, "Well, now you need something else, right?" That was a unique situation. Now we have to sell them something. And then I made a proposal for a book called Mars Seguro, which they bought and brought out, and it promptly won the Aurora Award for Best Canadian Science Fiction Novel. And so now they like me at DAW, I like them.
Well,
my latest book is my 8th novel with DAW.
Yeah, no.
Other publishers too, but that's my big publisher.
Well, DAW's a cool place. Like, I've interviewed Gerald Brandt, and he told me his story, how he got in there. Like, it sounds like a really, really good place to actually, if you want to get in there, once you're in there, they treat you really well. So
yeah, the great thing about DAW is that it's essentially it's Betsy Wollheim and Sheila Gilbert. Of course, DAW stands for Donald A. Wollheim, which was Betsy's father. He started the company after he left Ace, and when he got ill in the 80s, then she took it over and she brought Sheila in. So Sheila and Betsy own the company, and they're also the editors. So unlike a big company like Tor or some of the others, where you might have an editor who's interested in your work, but then he has to sell it to the publishers in a big meeting, if Betsy or Sheila like your book, they're not only the editor, they're also the publisher.
yeah.
So if you can sell to DAW, they're just wonderful people. It's a wonderful family feel. I was actually Gerald found out that he was to Sheila while we were both at World Fantasy in Washington, D.C. And so I was there, and he got invited out to the dinner, and I knew about it pretty much as quick as anybody did, which was really great, because I've known Gerald for quite a while. And once you're in, DAW is really good about trying to keep its authors going in the field. So even though my sales weren't great on some of my earlier books, they had me switch genres, and I wrote as fantasy as E.C. Blake and Lee Arthur Chane, 2 pseudonyms. I wrote 4 books under one of those 2 pseudonyms. And now I'm back as Edward Willett with my latest book. And I've sold the first 2 books in another series, so the first one will be out next year, and hopefully that's a long-running series. So I can't say enough about DAW. They're wonderful.
No, it sounds like looking out for you. You got like I'm just going to say this just from your earlier titles. You got like this amazing imagination, or at least younger you had like he was ballsy.
Well,
you know, so yeah.
It's kind of a necessary thing if you're going to write in this field.
Well, no, I think imagination is a huge thing in any field, like science or art, either or. You need some imagination. You have to, if you're a scientist, even a journalist, like anyone that's like seeking out information, you have to come up with a perspective that a lot of people haven't thought of before, and that's really hard to do today, because we have so much access to so much different data. Like unlike in previous times, like the fact that we're having this conversation now, like over Skype, it's not a new technology anymore, but it's new compared to like how things were done before. And like I said, so if you're in science or journalism or medicine, you have to think of creative solutions to the problems today. And in writing, it's the same thing. You have to have a perspective and an idea that's just different, you know. So, or you're not going to get any attention onto yourself, because everybody writes a book these days. So,
I think it's also what I found, because I've got 20-some novels at this point,
yeah,
or in the works. It feels to me like it's almost like a muscle that you exercise. So I've been thinking in these terms since 11 years old, Castor Glass Hypership Test Pilot. And it's like anything else, you know, if you're going to be an athlete, you have to practice, and you have to build up that muscle. And as a writer, you practice, and you read, and you write, and you think, and you try to come up with ideas, and it's literally something that you practice at, and you get better with time, hopefully.
Well, hopefully. Well, so I guess the question I'm going to, ask here on this is, like, do you think, like, do you think that, like, the, 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 do you ever worry about because this is like maybe a fear in the back of my mind. I've done 3 books so far with a very small publisher, and I'm going to do a 4th next year on something else, something different. But I always have this like fear in the back of my mind that I may run out of things to say, right? Because I feel like now, because I'm still kind of getting in, I feel like there's almost like a freshness and a rawness to the things I'm saying. But as I get older, I mean, I love Ray Bradbury. Like, I love Ray Bradbury, but young Ray Bradbury and like Ray Bradbury at the end of his life, he wasn't saying too many different things anymore. And he still was a good writer. I love Ray Bradbury, but like there was a lot more passion in it, like when he started versus today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you can certainly see it in some writers. I know that that's happened to me, but on the other hand, I've never been, my selling actually didn't really start until I was almost 40? I was almost 40 before I started selling books, and 45 by the time I was selling to Daw. So in a way, younger me was writing stuff that nobody will ever see because...
No, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. It's just like that. I guess this is me just like always. I always kind of fear that maybe just maybe an irrational fear on the back of my head. I don't know. It's just I work again. Maybe this is a long term problem, but like down the road, it's like I hope I can come up with different things to say all the time, because if I'm not saying anything new, I don't know if I should be writing anymore.
Only you can make that decision.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
My hero has always been Dave Duncan. Dave Duncan, brilliant fantasy writer.
Oh, God, yeah.
And he was an oil field geologist. And until before he started writing books, writing fantasy novels. And he's in his 80s now. And I just read his most recent one. And it really, really good. And he's starting a new series. He hopes to be starting a new series with it. So,
that's cool. I haven't read anything.
It's my hero, so.
No. Dave, I haven't read anything since King's Blades, but that was really, really good. And I just have not had a chance to run into any more of his stuff. Something that people keep telling me I should amend. So.
I recommend it.
Yeah, fair enough. So you got. So when's your next book exactly coming out?
Well, the next book will start a new series called World Shapers, and so the first book is called World Shaper. It's in revisions right now. I have to have them done by the beginning of January. We've already been talking cover art. It's supposed to come out September of next year, and they bought the first 2 books in the series, so hopefully that will take off and it becomes a long-running series, because the concept is such that it could run forever, which would be nice if people would buy it enough so I could write it forever.
It's cool. Like, so an interesting question, just based on what I've been seeing more on the independent circuit. Are your books getting bigger, or are they getting smaller, or are they kind of maintaining the same size? Yeah, just length.
It's pretty constant. My contract is usually for 100,000 words.
Okay.
Daw doesn't care that much, I think Magebane, which was the book I wrote as Lee Arthur Chain, I think it was contract in words and came in at almost 150. That's the longest thing I've written. But I've gotten really good at writing 100,000 words. I'm also really good at writing at 60,000 words, because I had a YA series called The Shards of Excalibur from Kato Books, which is a literary publisher actually in Regina here, although they do publish some fantasy. And all of those books are 60,000 words, and it's like 60,000 words, and it all wrapped up, and it was almost to the word a couple of times that it came out at 60,000 words. But yeah, no, I'm writing at about the same length, but I can't say if books are getting longer or not.
No.
I'm currently finally reading Game of Thrones, so talk about long books.
Oh God, yeah. No, that's long. Wait till you get to Storm of Swords. That's a long book.
That's the one I'm reading right now.
I'm
on Kindle, so it says you still have 7 hours and 40 minutes left in this book, and I've been reading it for, 10 hours or something already.
You're like, no, come on. That should be closer than that. No. I stopped at Feast for Crows. I do have Dances with Dragons. Maybe I'm punishing myself a little bit. I'm just waiting to know when the next book actually is coming out. I find like it's not really much of a difference in length of time. It's just it for me because I would have had to wait between books 5 and 6 that long anyway. But it just I don't know. Good writer. You never know when a book of his is coming out, right? So it's like I'm hoping sometime soon so I can get to book 5.
I kind of put it off, and
yeah,
I kind of had this idea that if I started reading it now, it would take me so long to read them that by the time I got to the end of book 5, book 6 would be finally coming out. But I'm going through them fast enough. I don't think that's going to happen.
No. That happened with me with Robert Jordan. Like we used to when he started Wheel of Time, it was like one a year, and then he eventually spread it out. Grant you, very complicated world. It got really like I understood why it took so long, but the wait just like come on, I want to know what happens next. But that's a good thing, right?
It's actually my.
Pardon?
As you say, the other one that's really slow. That's the other one who's really slow. Who's actually a fellow Daw author is Pat Rothfuss.
Yes. I
We're all dying for the next one of those.
Yeah, we kind of are, but I get with him. I get the impression. Again, I don't know him or anything. I get the impression that this was a lot harder series than he expected it to be. That's just the impression I'm getting. What I got with it because I think he had a concept once upon a time that was simpler, and it just got more complicated than he anticipated. I could be wrong on that, but.
I have met him. I haven't talked to him about his writing process. He's been at a couple of Daw dinners that I've been at. My impression is that he's very much a perfectionist, and he just really, really wants to get it perfectly right. So.
Yeah, no, and I think I can totally I can respect that. I mean, I think there comes a point with writing that you kind of have to let it go because no matter how good you are, there's always a mistake.
Yeah, I'm just reading his biography of Leonardo da Vinci, this new biography that's out, which I highly recommend. And it's talking about one reason why he was known for not finishing his paintings was partly because it's like the perfect is the enemy of the good. He could see what he wanted to do and he couldn't quite do it yet, and he'd come back to it years later and try to incorporate things that he'd learned about painting over the years. And you can be so much of a perfectionist that you never finish what you're trying to do.
Well, that and Da Vinci's case, he's also doing all kinds of other things. I'm more of a fan of Da Vinci the scientist than Da Vinci the artist. Not that Da Vinci the artist is bad. He's certainly better than I was, but going back to his imagination, that's for a guy from that era to come up with the ideas he did. I'm blown away. It's mind blowing. What he could come up with. He's one of 3 people I would have loved to meet in history.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and this new biography of him, I should find out who wrote it. Mm-hmm. I highly recommend. It just came out this year.
Yeah, I'll have to definitely take a look. Well, like I said, so I guess we'll end the interview with this question. We were talking about perfection and perfectionism. I mean, does it get harder to write I guess harder in a sense because as you get better at knowing what works and what doesn't, it's a lot easier to be more critical on yourself. Do you have that problem, or is it just, or are you more relaxed with the process at this point?
Everything that I do poses a different challenge or a new challenge. And World Shaper is an interesting one. My last book was called The City Born, and that was interesting in its own way. The thing that was interesting to the challenge there was that all the action takes place once you get past some initial material, you get into the main body of the action, the whole thing takes place over the course of basically a weekend. And I didn't realize until I wrote it how fast everything was happening. So that was interesting. But the new one, and one of the things that Sheila Gilbert at Daw is really good about is helping you with this sort of stuff, is we discovered as you write it that the concept is way more complex than I had thought. I had a sort of this elevator pitch concept of it, and as we got into it and figuring out exactly how the worlds work and the magic, well, it's not really magic, it turns out to be more of a science fiction story, but all of the background information got much, much more complicated. So, and I want this to be really, really good, so in a way I write really fast like I always have, but I'm always finding new challenges and always trying to make the next thing I write better than the last thing. And I think that is the big challenge that we all face.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not getting better, you're going backwards. It's just the way it is. All right. I think we have a decent interview here. So why don't we end it with you telling how people can find you and what your current project and your next project is, just to wrap things up.
Okay. You can find me at edwardwillett.com, EDWARDWILLETT.com. Those last two T's are important because people always leave off the second T. And I'm also on Twitter at eWillett, two T's again. But if you go to the website, you can find links to everything else. My most recent book is called The City Born from Daw Books. It's a standalone science fiction novel, and it's in bookstores now in hardcover, and the paperback will be out in July. And my next book will be called World Shaper, and it starts a new series called World Shapers, and that will be out next September. And it's science fiction with a fantasy feel, I think is how I describe that. Not entirely sure if it'll be an Edward Willett book or if it will have one of my pseudonyms. You check out my website, you can sign up for my newsletter, and then you'll know more than you'd ever possibly want to know about my writing.
Wow, I can't believe I just interviewed Edward Willett. Check out The City Born, which is available now through Dahl Books or anywhere you can buy books electronically. You can definitely check it out there. I'm looking forward to the World Shapers myself, and I'll hopefully get to check that out in September. I want to thank Ed very much for being part of the show. And that will do it for another episode of Just Joshing. And I promise you the next one will be a lot sooner. So we're going to change some stuff up. I always used to say stay inspired. I still think you need to stay inspired to keep going and doing what you're doing. But I think from here on in, it's going to be dream with your eyes wide open. Simply because anything truly is possible. So make it happen. You never know. All right? All right. I'll see you guys next time.
Josh.